Welcome to episode 1, The Director's Cut. I'm your host, Mick Larson, the producer and director of the documentary series. Basically, the Director's Cut series includes an expert from the documentary. In this episode, that expert is Bill Tammeus, a religion journalist and author. Bill and I break down, expand, and reflect on each comment, and hopefully, the Director's Cut gives you a deeper understanding of each episode. So let's get started. Bill, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Glad to do it.
Why don't you give us a little background on how you became a religion columnist, author, and writer?
Well, I came to the Kansas City Star as a reporter and was spent about 7 years on the news staff. And eventually I moved to the editorial page where I actually get to express an opinion. And as I was doing that, I was writing a humor column, but as we know, all humor comes out of pain. And eventually I began writing some more serious columns that try to look at the world through my theological lenses, which does not mean I was writing Presbyterian sermons for the Star at all. What it means is that I was looking for meaning in the world and trying to process that and give it back to readers. While I was doing that, I was complaining to editors about how little we put into coverage of religion. One or two people at most covers this whole thing while we have dozens of sports writers. And finally, the editor got tired of me griping at him and said, well, why don't you just move your column to the faith section and help us with that? And at the time, I was thinking about taking early retirement to work on some books, but I said, okay, I'll do that. And so I spent a couple of years at least writing a weekly column in the faith section and covering news stories about religion. And I was trying in that work to find the thread of religion in almost every news story and to explain that to readers. So I'm retired from the Star, but I continue to write in other venues these days, sometimes even back in the Star.
What about books?
I have authored or co-authored 7 books. Many of them have to do with matters of faith. One is a book about the Holocaust and Jews who survived the Holocaust with non-Jewish help in Poland that I wrote with a rabbi. One of my more recent books is called The Value of Doubt, in which I argue that unless you're part of a faith community that lets you ask the really hard questions about religion, like where was God in the Holocaust, you're not going to develop a faith that will sustain you in good times and bad. And then my most recent book is 9/11 related. It has to do with the trauma my family went through because my nephew was on the first plane to hit the World Trade Center on 9/11. And in that book, I raise the question of how people get sucked into extremism and what we can do about it.
We'll start with the first segment, which is about the teachings of Jesus. And, the documentary poses the question, if Jesus were here today and if he were to vote, which is a debate in itself, obviously, which party does his message of love and grace align with better? And so that the voiceover, the documentary will set this up. And actually, the first comment in the documentary is from you. So we'll let it roll here.
Suppose, or even imagine, after some 2,000 years after the crucifixion of Christ, he walks upon the shores of the United States of America, seeking asylum and American citizenship for the purpose of voting in the 2024 election. Would his message of love and grace align itself better with the Republicans or Democrats? Simple question, with a complicated American answer. Before we wade into that debate, let's quickly reacquaint ourselves with the teachings of Jesus and what those lessons mean in the U.S. in 2024.
The Jesus that the church has talked about and preached about for 2,000 years is the same Jesus. And he's the one who has started this revolution of love and grace that continues.
All right, Bill, that's your introduction to the whole documentary is on you. So when you say love and grace, what exactly do you mean?
Well, By love, I mean always having the other person's best interest at heart. Always, even when it costs you something. And I think Jesus demonstrated how to do that in his relationship with his disciples and his other followers and the people he ran across in his ministry. Grace is simply unmerited favor, and it's what we who are Christians believe that God gives us. We are not worthy of God's love, but we get it, and we ought to be thankful for it. So grace is a present that we didn't deserve, and we ought to be smart enough to say thank you for it.
All right, next up is Jimmy Itzak, who was the director of church life here at Second Presbyterian in Kansas City when we recorded this. He's moved on. Before we move on to that comment, as Second Presbyterian, how does that differ from First Presbyterian?
That's an interesting story because old First Pres, which no longer exists, was down at about 10th and Forest, and it turned out to be a pro-slavery church, what was called in our terminology old school. There were some folks there who didn't like that, who broke away from it. They were new school, meaning pro-abolition or anti-slavery, and they formed Second Church at the end of the Civil War. The interesting thing about that is that old First Church slowly began to die, and by the 1960s, a friend of mine was assigned as a temporary pastor there to go close that place down. And when that happened, guess what happened to old First Pres? It got merged into St. Mark's Church over at Wayne Minor Housing Project, a predominantly all-black church that my friend Sam Mann, a white man, was pastor of. So a pro-slavery church gets merged into an all-black church, and I say God has a wonderful sense of humor.
And what became of all of that? With that St. Mark's?
St. Mark's is there today, and Sam is retired, but it's over there. It does a lot of wonderful work with children and neighborhood things and so on.
All right, let's listen to Jimmy's comment here.
Jesus had this incredible message of compassion. Jesus had this incredible message of reaching out to touch the untouchable, to reach out to the people that no one wanted to talk to, no one wanted around. Jesus constantly reaches out to ostracized people groups, the Samaritans, the Gentiles, and constantly tells them that they have a place in the kingdom. They have a place in the world. And the kindness that he shows them was revolutionary.
Talk about what Jimmy comments as far as Jesus' compassion.
It seemed to me that Jesus was always able to put himself in the shoes of others, the sandals of others. He understood the human pain and suffering that was rampant when he was walking the earth. It was that area of the world was under Roman rule, and the Roman governors and so on were awful governors of people. And there's a lot of suffering. 98% of the people were in poverty. And the 2% at that time lorded it over them. And Jesus inevitably identified with the 98% and wanted them to know that they were part of God's world also.
And what about Jimmy, talk about all people have a place in the kingdom of God.
Yeah, and that raises the question of, you mean even non-Christians? Well, it's not the job of Christians to decide who gets to be in an eternal relationship with God. We have our story, we tell our story. People who are like that story and feel connected to it join us. But in the end, the question of who is human in God's eyes is for God to decide and not for us to decide.
All right, next up is Reverend Gayla Rapp. She's the senior pastor of Ashbury United Methodist Church in Prairie Village, Kansas. And let's listen to her comments.
Jesus' teachings spoke to the life of the person with whom he was speaking. So if he spoke to somebody who was marginalized, he looked at them and said, "You're a child of God. You are loved." If he looked at somebody who was hungry, he said, "Here's bread for your body, and here's bread for your soul." He looked at people who were the elite and said, if you think your power and prestige is going to get you what you think will bring you joy, let me show you another way. So he did not come just for a certain group of people. He came for all people, and he tailored his message to the brokenness of those people and showed them how he came to bring them into wholeness.
So that kind of dovetails nicely with the last question. You know, Jesus came for all people, not just one group.
It seems to me that the message that Jesus spoke and lived is one that everybody in the world can find a place in that message and can connect to that message in some way. Even those who have adopted a brutal way of life, who are lording it over others, there's hope for those folks as well, that they can hear what Jesus is saying and look themselves in the mirror and say, "Oh, I get it now." Some of us never do, and I don't have any idea what happens to those people afterwards. That's not my call.
Is there any irony in the fact that, you know, it was a Jewish movement, but then again, Jesus is calling all people, not just people of the Jewish faith?
If you read the Hebrew Bible carefully, you discover that the job of the Jewish people is not to be a separatist, we're the special chosen group. What they were chosen for was not special privilege, but responsibility. They were chosen to show the world what it looks like to live in a healthy relationship with God. It seems to me they've done an incredible job with that. Now, more than half of the world follows and worships that same God, whether they call themselves Jews or Christians or Muslims, and perhaps some other faith traditions as well. But if you just count the Jews, Christians, and Muslims in the world, they are connected to the God Jesus was talking about.
All right, next up is Justin McKee. He's a cowboy pastor at the Lenapaw Cowboy Church in Lenapaw, Oklahoma.
If Jesus was here today, he'd be the same that he was back then. And that is, he'd be on the societal edge. You know, I mean, he was around the sinners, the tax collectors, the people that nobody trusted, that nobody liked. And I mean, the roughest, toughest people in that society then was the ones he said, "All right, you fishermen, you come with me. All right, you're tough enough to hang with me. You don't care what people think of you. You might be able to handle that." And so I think he'd fit in nicely. And I think he appreciates a cowboy attitude is, you know, I really don't care what you think. This is what I believe. And you can believe it if you want to, and you can ride along with us, and it's going to be a wild ride. And if you don't, that's fine too.
Yeah, what do you think about Pastor McKee talking about Jesus would be on the societal edge?
I think that's a fair comment, and of course it matters what you mean by societal edge. If you are talking about those who are poor, in poverty, those who are hungry, those who are homeless, those who are crushed by some system or another, those are the people that Jesus has most in mind and most appeals to, it seems to me. If you're talking, however, about simply shaping us up so that we don't commit personal Saturday night sins, we miss a lot of the point, because some of the point has to do with the systems that we live under, the educational system, the prison industrial system, the economic system, and it's those systems that often crush the people that Jesus cared most about. He cared about everybody, but those who were especially, his message was aimed at them especially. So if that's the societal edge, yeah, I agree. That's where Jesus would be.
Yeah, I assume he was talking about people in need.
Absolutely. And the question is, whom does poverty benefit? Poverty benefits some people in this country. And the new book called Poverty by America by an author whose name won't come to me right now, but makes that very point, that there are systems in place that keep people in poverty because it benefits others, and those are the crushed people that would most have Jesus' heart, I think.
Our next comment is from Jimmy again.
The power of Jesus' message was not what was going to happen, but what he modeled for us while he was here.
Jimmy's comment here is kind of a preview of something he talks about later in the documentary, and that's the difference between what the future looks like after the crucifixion of Christ versus what he modeled for us in his life on earth. What are your thoughts about that?
I go back to the very first thing Jesus is recorded ever saying, which is right after his baptism, and who less needed to be baptized than Jesus, but nonetheless, he said, "The kingdom of heaven is at hand," meaning God's reign is a breaking in, and you can live in the kingdom today, in the reign of God, by adopting the values of compassion and mercy and love and caring and so on. The reality is that Jesus promised us the kingdom, and what we got was the church so far. But the kingdom's coming. The church continues to insist that the kingdom is coming, and it's our duty to give demonstration projects of what the kingdom will look like when it finally comes in full flower. And if you believe there's no racism in the kingdom, you work against racism. If you believe there's no poverty in the kingdom, you work against poverty. And you show what it will be like, what we think it will be like when it comes. And so that seems to me to connect the needs of the present day with the needs of the future. Christians particularly, live in two worlds at once. They live in today's world, but they've always got the future kingdom in mind to come.
Next up, we have Father Paul Turner, pastor of Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception in Kansas City, Missouri.
I don't think Jesus advocated either for wealth or for poverty. I think he advocated for helping one another out. There's a story in Acts of the Apostles, so after the death and resurrection of Jesus, where the apostles are leading the first Christian community and trying to get everybody together. They're all living in harmony. They share the things that they own, and they tell about individuals who sold their property and then gave the money to the community so that everybody could benefit from it. I think this was more what they had in mind.
What do you think about this idea that Father Paul talks about, poverty versus wealth, and about sharing the wealth?
One of the things I think we have to keep in mind is that we operate under a different economic system today than Jesus did in the Roman kingdom, Roman Empire. And in our capitalistic system, there are reasons that some people thrive and others don't. And
You're talking about systematics.
Yeah, yeah. But when Father Paul was talking about people in the early days selling what they had and putting it in a common pot, some people say, well, that's just communism. And no, I would say it's communalism, which is different. Communism has its own faults and its own judgments it makes that get everything wrong, damn near. But capitalism itself has its fault lines. And so what Father Paul was talking about was the urge to be part of a community where you all share together, and you're all one body in a sense.
Next up is Reverend Rob Ryerseat, author of the book Running for Our Lives, A Story of Faith, Politics, and the Common Good.
Here at our church, we're looking at 2020. One of the things that we're talking about a lot is the teaching of Jesus when he said to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That word righteousness often gets translated righteousness and thought of as like a personal righteousness of like what I do in my individual life, being a good person, not lying, not stealing, not cheating, those kinds of things. But really the idea behind that word is much broader than that. It's actually maybe better translated justice. And so we've been thinking about here at our church this idea that the thing that Jesus wants us to seek first is God's kingdom and the justice that brings about in the world. And so that comes about in so many different ways, how we live in relationship to our neighbor, how we think about and exist in the world as an environment and the planet and caring for that. It has to do with the relationship between people of different races and ethnic groups, men and women, sexual justice, so many different things that are encompassed by that idea. But we think that the thing that Jesus urges us first to do is to care about justice in the world.
Yeah, so what do you think about that concept that righteousness is justice?
I like it a lot, and part of the reason I like it is that very often the term righteousness has come to mean personal piety. And that's personal piety is important, but it's not at base what Jesus was talking about. He was talking about justice, as Ryerseat said, talking about the need for fairness in the world, the need to take care of each other, and especially those who are on the what we earlier called society's edge. So it's not just not committing the Saturday night sins of drinking and gambling and dancing and all those things that the pietistic people worry about. It's a lot broader than that, and I think he's right about that.
Off the top of your head, that Jesus wants us to care about justice as the world? Is there a good example of Jesus either talking about that or demonstrating that?
The first thing that comes to mind is his crucifixion. He's on the cross, and he's got two other people up there on a cross with him, on a different cross, but two crosses. But despite his own suffering, he says to the one who said, I want to be in paradise with you today. And Jesus gives him that gift. He says, don't worry, you will be. At our worst times, we can give justice, we can give mercy, and it's hard to do, and we fail at it every day. I do, but that's the goal, and I think if we think about that scene where he simply is a man of grace, giving his grace away, that's a beautiful image to me.
Next up, we hear from Father Paul again.
A would-be disciple coming to him, and he's saying, I've kept all the commandments, I've done everything, what else do I need to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, it's simple. Sell all of your possessions and give the money to the poor. And the man goes away crestfallen because his possessions were many. We don't know if he did it or if he decided to go enjoy his wealth, but either way, he was thinking about that for the rest of his life. I don't think Jesus was, I don't think he has poverty as the goal of our lives, but I do think he expects us to share the things that we have with others.
This story probably gets told every day for the last 2,000 years, but What does that story mean to you as far as sharing things and taking care of other people?
That story tells me that Jesus understood that man and what was keeping him from entering the kingdom, and that was his wealth. The next person over, it would have been something else. So what he was saying is not a general rule for the whole world. It was for that guy. And when Jesus would look at me, he would identify some other failing that I need to fix. And so we have to be careful not to universalize these stories and parables and lessons because I think they're more individually aimed than that.
That's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about it that way. Okay, next up is Cowboy Pastor Justin McKee.
I mean, you just got to look at what he didn't do sometimes. Not what he did, but what he didn't do. And you know what? He didn't go picket Rome. Rome at the time that Jesus was here on earth was the most perverted nation maybe of all time. And he didn't say anything about, hey, don't do that. I mean, all of his followers were saying, hey, when are you going to raise up an army and take down those sinners? And he never said that. He said, why don't you worry about yourself? Why don't you worry about your own heart? He was sincerely concerned about an individual.
So, kind of a sidebar here, the fact that Jesus was so focused on individuals and wasn't going to get involved in Roman politics at that time, does that lead some credence to people who say, oh, well, Jesus would never vote, in a political sense?
I don't think so, because what Jesus really cared about was both individual health and societal health, individual justice and societal justice. And he went about it by gathering followers who would change the world. That was one way to do it. He didn't have a chance to vote. That wasn't part of what was offered to him as a Jew in Roman Jerusalem. So he found a way, and I think we are asked simply to find a way. And if that means voting, good, let's do it. If it means being engaged in other ways, let's do that as well. But I don't think that particular story tells us very much about whether Jesus would vote or not vote.
Next up is Reverend Rob again.
Obviously, when you think about the teachings of Jesus, you have to think about what he said was the greatest commandment, which is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And in our world today, I think, understanding that we love God by how we love our neighbor, and we love our neighbor, and loving God and loving our neighbor is all kind of wound up together, is the same thing. Jesus said this is the first and the second commandment, and they're actually one and the same. They're two sides of the same coin.
I think his comment really begs a question of, does loving our neighbors ourselves solve most of our problems?
It can, but we don't do it very well. And I speak personally here, I fail at that every day. And when we fail at it, bad things happen, and we end up making things worse. But loving our neighbor as ourselves, if we could really do that, the world would look very different from what it does today.
All right, next up is Reverend Gayla Rapp, and she kind of expands on this to some degree.
When Jesus said, love your neighbor, he was really drawing the circle wide. And he was speaking to a culture that looked at the other, the foreigner, the stranger, the alien, as somebody, not only somebody that we should keep at a distance, but somebody who was dangerous, somebody who was perhaps even unclean. And when Jesus came and said, love your neighbor, people don't have any sense of just how radical that message was to people. And even people hearing it might be offended by his suggestion that we should love our neighbor. Really, Jesus? If you knew my neighbor, you wouldn't know what you're asking me to do. Well, the message can be very simple, easy to say, hard to do.
So she's saying that Jesus was drawing a very large circle, and in our present day world, I kind of wonder, would the crisis at the border be a good example of, loving and taking care of your neighbor?
Yeah, I think so. Jesus was drawing from Judaism's core here. He was going back to Hebrew Scripture and saying this is what God has laid out for how to live. And when someone asked him, "Well, who is my neighbor?" then he told the story of the Good Samaritan, who gave generously to save somebody. And that's the model for us. And so the question is, yeah, okay, I love my neighbor, except not that guy. And when we say not that guy or not that person or not someone that color, we blow up the message and destroy it. And it's only when we try to live that out in some fullness that we can create the world that God wants us to have, I think.
And in God's kingdom, there aren't really any borders or country lines or that kind of thing, right?
That's right. And, nation states are a pretty new development in the world. A couple of hundred years that they've been around, and there are good reasons for nation states, and there are reasons that they just mess us up in all kinds of ways. And so when we are first Americans and then committed to our faith, we get it backwards, it seems to me.
All right, Bill, you're up next.
Who calls us to the very values that he preached about, particularly in the Sermon on the Mount, which was an absolutely countercultural sermon, turned the world upside down. And so, Jesus wanders into the world today. I don't see the message that he would give as any different from the message that he gave 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, so Bill, what was so revolutionary about the Sermon on the Mount?
Well, he turned everything upside down. He said, blessed are the meek instead of blessed are the powerful. Blessed are those who mourn as opposed to those who are joyful, on and on. And when you do that, you make people stop and say, wait, what? And really give some thought to it. And although I do believe that would still be his message today, I think he would tailor it to fit our own particular circumstances, so that instead of parables that are based in agriculture mostly, he would have parables that are based in technology and in other newer ways that we live today, so we could understand those, as opposed to parables about the mustard seed.
Mm-hmm. And why do you say his message would be the same today as it was 2,000 years ago?
Well, he spoke core truth about how to live, and that hasn't changed. If you live a loving life in the year 100 BCE or BC or 1984 or 2024, it means the same thing. And so I just don't think that core lesson and message has changed, and nor should it.
All right, up next is Pastor Rob again.
The Sermon on the Mount is so radical because it is so contrary and counterintuitive to what we typically see in human culture, whether it was the culture in which Jesus lived or whether it's the culture in which we live today here in America. When he begins the Sermon on the Mount by saying, blessed are the poor, I mean, we don't think of, poor, the hungry, the thirsty, those who are mourning. We don't think of those things as blessed. People post on social media, hashtag blessed when something good happens. And Jesus says, here are all these people that are blessed, that are experiencing the blessing of God, and they're all the people we wouldn't expect. And then he goes on to say, all of this stuff that you have heard, all of these things that the way you expect it to be, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and he turns all of that on his head and says, here's what I say to you. You need to turn the other cheek. You need to love your enemy. So throughout the whole Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives us a completely counterintuitive way of living that actually encompasses what God's vision for humanity is.
What exactly are the blessings of God that he's referring to?
Life itself, the opportunity to be part of nature. We often say, I'm going to go out in nature today. Well, indigenous people teach us we are part of nature ourselves, and to appreciate that, just the opportunity to experience the beauty of the world and the beauty of other people, those are among God's blessings for sure.
Why do you think God and Jesus moved away from an eye for an eye concept of the Old Testament?
And I would say that it's based on a misunderstanding of the old eye for an eye concept. That concept was actually a gift of grace. It was, prior to that, a lot of people said, you take my eye out, I'm killing you. And he says, no, if you lose an eye, then all you get to take is an eye. And there was a matter of justice going on there. So that eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, it sounds brutal to many people today, but in its context, it made some sense of mercy and fairness. And I don't think God or Jesus or Christianity generally or Judaism or Islam has moved away from, has rejected the idea of mercy and fairness, which the eye for an eye thing was an example of at the time.
As societies have gotten older and progressed and became more progressive, do you see us as a society being giving more mercy to more people, or has that changed at all over time?
Not when I look at the prison industrial complex that is existent in our land. We try, and there are laws that try to enforce fairness for people who have committed crimes and so on. But you know, if you look at who's in prison in terms of race, in terms of poverty, and so on, we just have not done very well with that, and we need to keep reforming our systems so that they don't crush people as they're doing now.
All right, our next comment is from author and psychiatrist Dr. Alan Francis. He wrote the book, The Twilight of American Sanity.
The religion of Jesus Christ was a religion of love and of charity, of caring for the most vulnerable, of kicking the rich out of the temple because they were selfish, of following the righteous path of the group rather than the selfish interest of the family. He said, leave your family and help mankind.
His comment about love and charity, that message.
That's really at the heart of all healthy religion, not just Christianity, not just Judaism, not just Islam, but any religion that is healthy has those values to it.
What about this gets referred to a lot, kicking the tax collectors out of the temple? What's the symbolism there or meaning in that? It was the money changers that were set up to allow people to buy a bird or an animal to be sacrificed in the temple, and you needed temple money to do that. So you took generic money or cultural money and turned it into temple money, which is why they were there. But what Jesus said about that was, that's become the focus here. You are cheating people, you're turning this into a marketplace instead of a place of worship, and enough of that. And there's such a thing as righteous anger, and he showed us how to do that, I think. There are times when I would like to overturn some tables in some places, but I'm perhaps not as strong on that as Jesus was. Maybe perhaps a good example of breaking systems that are crushing people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And and the money changers were cheating the poor people. I mean, there's almost no question. Otherwise, why would Jesus be so upset about it? So yeah, he could quickly analyze what was happening because he was part of that system. He was a Jewish man in a Jewish system. He knew what was going on, and in fact, there are well-to-do people in the world who live by Jesus' values and who use their money well. And so it's not just give all your money away. That's not the answer.
And we have one last comment from Reverend Gayla Rapp.
Cannot find anywhere where Jesus did not ultimately turn to love and grace. Even when he was calling people to be accountable, he did that in a way that was a loving way, because he knew that until they let go of their judgment of others, they could not live in the fullness of his love. So it was really for love's sake that he called people to let go of their prejudice, because he knew by letting go, then they can live in the fullness of the love that they were created to live in.
The judgment of others seems to be a big thing.
Yeah, and boy, do we do that all the time. And we have to make judgments. I mean, we have to draw conclusions. I sometimes say my only artistic talent is that I can draw conclusions. But in doing that, you want to be careful that you are taking everything into consideration and you are coming to conclusions that are fair and make sense, instead of simply judging others by your own standards, which are rarely God's standards, I've come to discover. So, when the Bible says, and by the way, the Bible doesn't say anything. It has to be interpreted. But when the words in the Bible say, "Judge not that ye not be judged," it's not saying don't discern things. You have to be discerning. It just means don't be a jerk about it. That's highly theological language.
We can all understand that, though. Definitely. Okay, our last comment in this first segment about the teachings of Jesus is from Reverend Rob again.
I read the Gospels, and you see Jesus giving people health care, taking responsibility for other people's health care. And what's the excuse? What do Christians say? I'm not responsible. I'm not paying for somebody else. Jesus takes responsibility for other people's health care. You see Jesus say things like, don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear. Don't be anxious about these things. And we have Christians that are absolutely obsessed with those things and care about, the economy and who's going to give them the biggest tax cut so that they have more money. Jesus says you can't serve God and money. And we have Christians who are obsessed with wealth. And it's just over and over and over again. There's these things that seem so clear and basic. So Jesus tells a story about a man that a Roman soldier says, "Hey, I'm going to force you to carry my pack for a mile." And Jesus says, well, if he does that, go 2 miles. If someone asks you for your coat, give them your shirt as well. And it's essentially, Jesus is telling us, be inconvenienced for other people. When the governmental authorities force you to do something, be even more gracious than they can force you to be. And we've got Christians who are obsessed with, well, the government can't force me to bake a cake for a gay couple. Jesus, it seems to me that Jesus would say, bake the cake and give it to the couple for free. That's what Jesus says. Do the thing that you're supposed to do. Do the thing that seems unjust to you, and be gracious about it, and be exuberant about it, and be loving about it. Don't care just about your rights. Care about people. And I don't know how the crystal clear teachings of Jesus and how they would be applied in our world, how it's so missed by so many people.
So, what do you think about this idea of being inconvenienced and being gracious about it?
I think he's right. It's a hard lesson to hear. We don't want to be inconvenienced. We don't want to give more than we're supposed to owe. But that's what makes this. That's what makes healthy religion so attractive to me. That it calls us beyond ourselves to be more than we thought we could be, and to, in the process, draw others into that so that they also get to experience the generosity of the divine. I think his idea about baking a cake for a gay couple, yeah, bake them 2 cakes, you know. I thought that's where he was going, but he just said, no, just give it away. Absolutely, and it's not that we shouldn't have standards of behavior, sexual standards of behavior, but that, you know, the whole issue of what the Bible says about homosexuality, I'm not going to get into, except that all it basically says is love one another, for heaven's sakes, and the Bible has been misused in so many ways in that area.
What about the idea of Jesus giving people health care?
That's clearly what he was doing. He was able to do that in a way that I'm not able to. I mean, I've never tried to cure a leper, but I've seen lepers in my life. I've lived in India in my life, and but those were powers that individual had that I don't. But the message is care about the health care of other people and do what you can. Among other things, pay your taxes so that Medicare and Medicaid can work for people who need it and deserve it. So.
Reverend Rob talks about how he doesn't understand how the teachings of Jesus are so misunderstood today. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with him. It seems to me that we, in Western culture, we have centered money and centered power and centered position and esteem over against the values that Jesus wanted us to center of love and compassion and mercy and tenderness. And I'm guilty of that as well. I look at that. I don't do the Jesuit examen every day at the end of the day where I sit down and say, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? But it's not a bad idea to do that, to say to yourself, did I live up to Jesus' desires for me today? And so often I would have to say I failed. And because I failed, the world is a worse place for it. But when I feel like I'm trying, I have a sense that the world is a better place for it because of that. But there's a lot we need to fix, and I'm just astonished at God's patience. You know, she at one point looked at the world and said, enough of that, and Noah, you're the only one I'm going to save. And so why that hasn't happened again is beyond me, frankly, which is one more thing I don't understand about God.
Based on everything we heard in segment 1, Teachings of Jesus, does his message of love and grace align itself better than with one political party or the other at this point in time?
I think it aligns itself with particular candidates better than other candidates, no matter which party they identify with. I think saying that no Republican loves Jesus, that Democrats are the devil, none of that helps. And let's look rather at what each candidate is offering and how they perform. I'm in the era of Donald Trump. I'm tempted to, just blast away, and I don't think that helps at all. So I would resist labeling one party or the other as the party of Jesus, despite the fact that some parts of some of those parties do that.
To me, the easiest thing to see is, separating children from their parents at the border would be probably like the last thing Jesus would want his followers to do.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And yet, because we have nation states and because we have borders, we need laws about how to treat those borders. And, if everybody's just going to forget about borders, that would be a different world, and it would be a world I wouldn't mind living in, frankly. But we have to recognize the reality of what we do have, and we can't simply throw away laws that say you can't cross this border without permission. We just have to deal with it in the most loving way possible. And the least loving way possible would be to cage up children and separate them from their families. And that's what we did.
Anything you want to comment on that I haven't asked you about as far as that first segment?
No, I don't think so. I think, I hope people will give some really serious thought to how their own faith commitments shape their politics and shape their civic engagement. We are taught in this country not to, that we don't want a theocracy, and we don't. But that doesn't mean that our faith should not in some ways guide us as to how we govern ourselves. And those are questions it's perfectly legitimate to ask a candidate, is how will your faith affect public policy? That's a fair question, and I think it's one we ought to be asking.
Yeah, it brings up an interesting point that a lot of people think religion and politics should be separate, and they shouldn't commingle. But what I hear you saying is actually your faith should form your politics to some degree.
Your faith certainly can do that, and yes, it should. But what we have to be careful about is understanding how church-state separation works. Church-state separation is meant to protect the church, protect religion from being invaded by government. It is not designed to keep the voice of religion out of the public square. The voice of religion has a place in the public square. We just can't subsidize it, as we're now doing in various ways, and we can't, make it easy to pay public money to hear religion. That's not the point at all. But religion should have its voice, just like every other segment of society. And when I hear people say that's separation of church and state, he shouldn't be able to say that. Well, no, you've got freedom of speech. He can say whatever he wants in the public square. And just deal with it on the merits of the argument and not on whether it's religion or not.
And one thing about the United States is that religion has flourished because there is no state religion. There's so many different kinds of religions, and people are able to worship the way they want to.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just learned that a friend of mine, I meet in the elevator of my building on Sunday morning, it turns out he's heading over to a Buddhist temple that gathers at Unity Village. And I thought, that's not the Buddhist temple, Buddhist congregation I know. So I began to, how many are there? How many Buddhist centers are there? I've found 8 of them so far in the metro area. And
that's just Kansas City.
Yeah. And so I'm about to work on a column, I think, about, I didn't know all of this. I have friends who are Buddhists, and I know a Lama very well, as a good friend of mine. But I had no idea that all these other centers were out there operating in this tradition. So, religion is everywhere, and the fact that the churches in Europe began to decline well before churches in this country have gone through decline, had to do with the fact that they were established churches, and the Church of England, for instance, which is just not a good way to run a church or a country.
Well, Bill, let me thank you for, number one, your contribution to the documentary, and now thank you for your contribution to this podcast. The first time you're not going to remember this, but the first time we worked together was on a documentary project on intelligent design.
Oh, yeah.
So we interviewed you because all the stuff was going on at the state capitol in Kansas, in
Yeah.
Topeka,
Yeah.
on the whole intelligent design thing. And that was the first time I met you, first time sat down and interviewed you. And that was somewhere in the early 2000s, I guess.
Yeah, or 90s even.
Yeah, it could have been late 90s.
Yeah. Wow. Huh. Yeah, that whole intelligent design thing has sort of disappeared from the public.
As soon as they lost the case in Dover, Pennsylvania, it was gone.
Yeah.
And the judge admonished them for, really messing up the community over that.
Yeah. Well, now other things mess up the communities, so there's always something.
That's a perfect way to end this conversation.
Good.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Nick.